as you say, shattering the stereotypes. And I feel like since we're here talking about the Black men can't be monogamous stereotype, and we're talking about emotion and connection, I feel like it's only right to address toxic masculinity. What does that mean to you? And in this conversation, how is it important?
So there's a big buzzword going around called toxic masculinity. I don't know how many people may have seen the commercial that the Gillette company put out. The company that makes razors, they did a commercial, and it got a lot of backlash from men because men were saying that the commercial was perpetuating this idea that men were toxic. But in reality, what the commercial was saying was that men should be willing and open to looking at masculinity from a different perspective. It wasn't saying that men were toxic. So here's my take on this whole thing called toxic masculinity. There's no such thing. There's no such thing as toxic masculinity. And here's why. If we look at masculinity, masculinity is really just an energy. So women have masculine traits. Masculine energy is the energy of doing. It's that ambitious, that drive. It's masculine. It's what gets us going, right? Femininity is the energy of being. Men have feminine energy. Now, when you say that, men go, no, man, I ain't got no feminine energy. It's just an energy. It's the energy of feeling. It's the energy of being. You know, we hear things like women's intuition, as though women have more intuition than men. No, men are just as intuitive as women. But we've been conditioned not to be in touch with that because we're taught not to be in touch with our feelings. And intuition is just an inner knowing. It's a feeling. And so when you hear this term toxic masculinity, there's no such thing. Now, when you see men doing bad things, that's a toxic behavior. That's not toxic masculinity. If it's a toxic behavior, it's a toxic behavior because the person that's perpetuating it is disconnected from his authentic masculinity. So
Say that again. Say it again. That was powerful.
So when you see a man that's acting out in what we call toxic masculinity, he's acting out that way is because he's disconnected from his authentic masculinity. When a man is connected to his authentic masculinity, he will never perpetuate toxic behaviors.
What is authentic masculinity? What does that look like, sound like?
Authentic masculinity comes from a man who is capable of being in touch with his authentic emotional self. So here's the thing. When we see violence, we look at violence and the first thing we think of is the energy and emotion of anger. The truth is, if we're willing to look a little deeper into what we see as anger, in a lot of cases, and I'd say the majority of cases, it's really not anger. It's really sadness or it's fear. But because men aren't taught and allowed to express those emotions, they're comfortable with anger because our culture says that's okay. Oh, he's just being a man. So authentic masculinity comes from a man who has done his emotional work. He's in touch with who he is as a human being. He recognizes and knows how to deal with his emotions appropriately. Therefore, if he feels anger, he can express anger. If he feels sadness, he can express sadness. So think of it this way. If you look at two kids playing out in the yard, kids are amazing because what they do is they express how they feel in the moment. So you can see two kids playing in the yard and then they can be fighting, angry. 10 seconds later, they're kissing, hugging, making up because they release the anger. It's gone. It's done. And then they can connect back to who they really are, which is their hearts. Now, what we do, especially as men, is when we experience pain, we suppress, repress, and deny it. It stays trapped in our bodies energetically. That energy, if we don't let it go, it's in there. And there's scientific evidence that supports that when we hold on to repressed anger and negative emotion, it causes dis-ease, disease in our bodies. So being willing to let go of that negative energy, that negative emotion, is how we become free from it. But our culture, once again, has conditioned us, as especially as men, to not express authentically the feelings that we have. And when we learn how to do that, we don't start building up all this negative energy. So let's look at violence as a whole. So we look at a guy that just walks into a place and starts killing folks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that comes from years and years of repressed pain. And pain will cause a person to do irrational things. The energy, the emotion of pain in the body short circuits our thinking process, our rational thinking. So you're no longer thinking, you're just feeling this energy of anger inside, and you're trying to figure out a way to let it go. Unfortunately, some men turn to these drastic measures to try to heal, to let go of that anger. So authentic masculinity says, if something hurts, I need to be able to express it. If I'm sad, I need to be okay with saying I'm sad. If I'm afraid, I need to say I'm scared. Nothing wrong with that, because in doing so, you become authentic. Therefore, you're not expressing anger to hide behind underneath your fear or your sadness. And so the key to authentic masculinity is the process of understanding who you are as a human being. And it's about unpacking a lot of the negative emotional traumas that we're holding on to. So if you listen to the experts will tell you that every addictive behavior has at its core an unresolved emotional conflict. So something happens, we make a decision about it in our minds, we create a feeling in our bodies, and if it's negative, it drives negative behavior. So what we have to be willing to do is to identify that negative energy that's trapped in us. Now, when I use the term negative, it doesn't mean good or bad. See, what we're trying to do is process it as good or bad. It's not good or bad. It's just positive and negative. We live in a vibrational, energetic universe, and everything is just energy, right? So you got positive, you got negative. When we experience negative emotions, it's just negative energy in our bodies that we have to learn how to let go. And that's what the healing process does. It allows us to let go of negative energy. And that's how you get to authentic masculinity. You give men a space to share openly and honestly with themselves and with others.